They're literally everywhere. In the air we breathe, the soil under our feet, and even living inside our own bodies. We're talking, of course, about bacteria, one of the oldest and, frankly, most successful organisms on the planet. Today we're going to dive into how these single-celled powerhouses, with their absolute masterclass in efficient design, have managed to dominate the globe.
So what is their secret? I mean, really, how can something so incredibly tiny, just a single cell, be so wildly successful? Well, to find out, we're going to have to shrink ourselves down and take a bit of a guided tour inside a typical bacterial cell. Right? Let's get into it. Okay, here's the plan. We'll start by getting past the cell's outer defenses. Then we'll step inside to the bustling factory floor. After that, we'll take a look at the genetic blueprint that runs the whole show, and finally, we'll see how it all adds up to a blueprint for total success.
Right, first stop on our tour, the outer defenses. You see, every successful organism needs a solid way to protect itself, and bacteria are absolutely no exception. We're about to see how this tiny cell armors up against a pretty hostile world.
Okay, so think of this diagram as our map for the tour. You can see all the key bits and pieces laid out for us. We're starting right there, on the very edge, with that tough protective outer layer.
The first line of defense is the cell wall. Honestly, the best way to think of it is as a rigid suit of armor. It's this tough, non-living layer that gives the cell its shape, and, this is absolutely crucial, it stops the cell from just bursting under pressure. It's not a complete seal, though. It's clever enough to let things like water and salts pass through freely.
Now, here's a really interesting detail. You might know that plant cell walls are made of cellulose. Well, bacterial walls use a completely different substance called peptidoglycan. And this isn't just some random fact, it's incredibly important. In fact, it's the very thing that antibiotics like penicillin are designed to attack, which is how they destroy bacteria without, harming our own cells. So, just inside that suit of armor is the cell membrane. Now, if the wall is the fortress, then the membrane is the bouncer at the club door. It's what we call partially permeable, which is just a fancy way of saying it has incredibly strict border control. It decides exactly what gets in and what gets out, keeping all the important stuff safely tucked away inside.
Right, we've made it past security. Let's move inside to the main factory floor, the cytoplasm. This, my friends, is where all the action happens. So the cytoplasm is this jelly-like stuff that fills the entire cell. And it might look a bit simple, but it's actually a bustling chemical soup. Everything else we're about to see, all the machinery, the blueprints, it's all just suspended right here. This really is the factory floor. And dotted all throughout that cytoplasm are these tiny little structures called ribosomes. You can think of them as the cell's miniature 3D printers or maybe little assembly line machines. They have one single vital job: protein synthesis. They build all the proteins the cell needs to live, to grow, and just to function. Okay, so we've got the factory floor, and we've got the machines. But what's telling them what to build? Well, for that, we need to find the control center, the cell's genetic blueprint. Now, unlike our cells, a bacterium doesn't have its main genetic code all neatly tucked away in a nucleus. Nope. Instead, it's a single large loop of circular DNA, a chromosome, that's just sort of floating around in the cytoplasm. This is the master blueprint. It's the core operating system that controls absolutely everything: cell division, development, the lot. But, and this is so clever, bacteria have a trick up their sleeve. Along with that main chromosome, they often have these much smaller rings of DNA called plasmids. Think of these like optional software plugins or special apps you might download. They aren't essential for day-to-day life, but they carry these amazing genes for survival, things like the code for antibiotic resistance.
So what you end up with is this brilliant two-part system. You've got the main DNA running all the core operations, while the plasmids provide these incredible bonus features for survival. It's this genetic teamwork that gives bacteria such a fantastic adaptive edge in almost any environment you can think of. Right. Our tour is nearly complete. We've seen the defenses, we've seen the factory, and we've met the control center. So let's zoom back out and see how this all comes together to create such an unbelievably successful organism. You see, the secret isn't one single feature, but the elegant, beautiful combination of them all. You've got a tough defense system, strict border control, a super efficient internal factory, and a highly adaptable genetic code. It's a minimalist masterpiece of engineering. It has everything it needs to survive, and absolutely nothing it doesn't. And that really brings us to our final thought. This simple, stripped-down design has allowed bacteria to thrive on this planet for billions of years, in every single environment you can possibly imagine. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? In a world that so often feels overwhelmingly complex, what can this tiny, ancient blueprint for life teach us about the fundamentals of survival and success?